Welcome back to Sid Mickle's Sports Unfiltered. Today we're going to talk about this man, the greatest catcher who ever played the game of baseball. And if there's any question in your mind about that, then we probably are not going to see eye to eye on your catching evaluation. Most people, when you talk about who they are and you talk about their baseball career and their overall greatness or validity as one of the greatest of all time, you have to quote all their stats, and you have to get into everything about their career. Johnny Bench, that's all you have to say. Almost unilaterally known as the greatest catcher to ever play the game. Now, I mentioned some stats, and I think it's worthwhile to go ahead, even though I've called him the greatest in my mind, for sure, because I am a very big Cincinnati Reds fan. I'll give you just a brief bit of history about Johnny Bench. 2,158 games played, 2,048 hits, 1,326 RBIs, 389 homers, 327 as a catcher. He hit .267 in his career as a catcher, catching an awful lot of games. He was a two-time MVP of the league, Rookie of the Year. His OPS is .817. 817. His WAR, 75.2. That's right, 75.2 above the average player. 10 consecutive Gold Gloves, 14 All-Star appearances, World Series MVP in 1976, where he hit .532 against the New York Yankees, who were swept by the Cincinnati Reds in that contest. 2 World Series titles, and of course, entry into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. Shockingly, there was only 96% of the vote on that first ballot. It just leads to the fact that most baseball writers have a political or some other goofy agenda instead of baseball greatness. But that's another subject for a totally different day. Now, let me back up just a second and tell you about my connection with Johnny Bench, which is very, very fragile and very thin, but something I'm very proud of. In my small hometown of LaFayette, Alabama, back in the day, the population was about 5,000 people. But one of those people was Jim Stewart. And Jim Stewart was known as the super sub on the Cincinnati Reds teams, of the late 60s and early 70s. And in 1971, January of 1971, to be more precise, Jim Stewart brought Johnny Bench and Pete Rose to our hometown for Jim Stewart Day. Now, I was a young kid then. I was blown away, a 15-year-old. We went to the local Chevy dealership, and I believe it was still Kilpatrick Chevrolet in those days. And I walk in with my cousin Bob to this long line of autograph seekers, and I see Johnny Bench, bigger than life. I already knew who Johnny Bench was, like most kids who played Little League or Pony League or high school baseball. He had this thing about him. He had this aura, and it was greatness. And he just sat there behind this draped table, smiling, posing for pictures and signing autographs. Well, my cousin Bob and I slowly worked our way up, and Bob had brought his camera. It was a little Kodak. It was kind of flat, and you inserted this cube in the top of it. It was a flash cube. And I had my baseball, and I'm nervous. I'm telling you, I'm nervous as hell. I walk up with a pen in hand, and I hand both to Johnny Bench. He has his own marker, and he signs Johnny Bench, and he hands it back to me, and I said, "Can I get a picture?" And he goes, "Of course." I lean over, he leans up, my cousin Bob is standing there. Does it take? Does it take? I look at Bench, he looks at me. Now, he didn't say, "Get out of here, you stupid kid, you're holding up the line." He just kind of grinned and just sat there. Bob took the cube out, reloaded it, boom. The flash took the picture. I was in a mixture of just admiration of this great athlete known as Johnny Bench, but also a little bit embarrassed. We made our way out, and I will tell you, I never have forgotten that moment. And Now that I've relocated back home, I drive down Highway 431 and I go by what is now known as the McClendon Building. But in my mind, it will always be the Chevy dealership that I got Johnny Bench's autograph. I want to tell you two other just strange kind of circumstances around that. Mr. Jim Stewart has passed away. And I remember that day. I remember the celebration, the parade. I remember the pictures in the paper. But obviously, the overwhelming conversation for a lot of my generation was Johnny Bench and Pete Rose. And as I've gotten older, I think of what it took for Jim Stewart to wrangle that visit. And I am absolutely forever in his debt as a young man, getting to shake hands, get an autograph, and a picture with Johnny Bench. And by the way, I don't have the ball and I don't have the picture. If I'm not mistaken, we lost the picture. It just was put in a drawer somewhere and you just lost it. The baseball, unfortunately, we had a need for a baseball one day, and the signed baseball just became the baseball we played with that day. Before you send in your comments and letters and screams and shouts and just condemnations, you're right, 100% right. But you got to remember, I was a goofy kid. We needed a baseball. I had one and we used it. I have no idea what happened to that baseball. But the simple fact that I got it from him, there are a lot of witnesses who know this is true. It's just fine. That's good enough. I have no other complaints about that. Now, the second thing that in my mind is very, very unusual about this day is Mr. Jim Stewart's family live right up the road today. His wife and his son, Jimmy, they live right up the road. We go to church together. I have spoken with both. We're not close friends, but we are neighbors, and we visit at church occasionally and just say hello. Jimmy's civic-minded, works very hard around town getting things done, so we're very appreciative of him. And it's just strange to me how the world sometimes makes these long, twisted journeys to kind of get you back into a place that you hold really special memories for. You hold incredible positive thoughts of. And Jim Stewart Day, it will always be one of my most favorite memories of being a teenager in this small town. Now, in another video, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some other famous people from this small town of LaFayette, Alabama. One of them you'll know right away. He is more closely associated with the city of Detroit, and his nickname is the Brown Bomber. That would be Joe Louis. Joe Louis just so happens was born near, if not in the city limits of LaFayette, Alabama. I have been told that I have walked by and seen his birthplace, and I believe that is true. He was a well-known person and a well-known family because of his incredible success in life. Joe Louis, world champion Joe Louis, who, by the way, is Joe Louis Barrel. And we have a little section for him in the Chambers County Museum right downtown. I hope we all can get together and make that museum start up again and show off these wonderful historic pieces. There are a few other people that are famous from this town. Well, let's say they were famous from being very near this town. Maybe they were in Buffalo or White Plains, just up Highway 431. And that was the Finney brothers. We're not going to talk about the Finney family's athletic feats today. We're going to save that for another video. Just know they're in the mix as well. And as I close out today, I want to tell you one other just slightly related story that to me is just a little bit funny. In my career, I traveled almost every week. I was on an airplane coast to coast for multiple years, about 20 years. And as I would typically fly Delta, I would wind up in Atlanta and in Cincinnati. And I love Cincinnati just because I love the Reds. So I'm in the airport and I have seen Rose, Perez, assorted other players. And one day I happened to see Johnny Bench walking through the concourse in CVG. And Mr. Bench was walking along with a suit bag over his shoulder, no entourage, just Johnny Bench, by himself, normal guy. And as I sat in my chair, I had this overwhelming urge to get up and go walk to him and ask him if he remembered the day he came to the small town of LaFayette, Alabama, and signed autographs during Jim Stewart Day. I didn't do that. Mercifully, I didn't do that to embarrass myself. But I did sit there and watch this baseball legend, this real GOAT, as the catcher in Major League Baseball. And I was just taken back to all those memories and that flood of positive feelings. And there are countless other memories and encounters that people like me, baseball fans, had at a young age and as an older age. And I will never forget that day. And I'm sure a lot of you have had great memories of very special college players, professional players, whatever. And sports can create great memories and bonds within families and children. My son and I are lucky enough to occasionally get a trip up to Truist Park to watch the Braves. And yeah, we typically go when the Reds are in town. And instead of $6 tickets and a crowd of 2,000 or 10,000 if it was the Reds, back then the Braves didn't draw very well. Now we go and it's a really packed out house. And we buy those $120 tickets and sit down on about row 10 and get to walk over to Chipper's Clubhouse or whatever it's called and get out of the sun during those midday games. It is a great experience. I loved Fulton County because I went there as a kid, and I really enjoyed Turner Field. But Truist, boy, I'll tell you, it is an experience. It is like a city within the city, and they have baseball games there. If you get a chance, you might want to go. Might want to take some of your family with you and create your own special memory. Until we get back together in a week or so, I hope everybody has a great week. I hope all your sports memories are as alive and as vivid as mine. Thank you, Mr. Bench, the greatest to ever play the game at catcher. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.